I never thought my life would spiral like this. I've faced raging storms on the open sea, hurricanes that could swallow ships whole, but nothing compared to the wreckage waiting for me on shore. If you've ever wanted to know what betrayal feels like, it's a combination of suffocation and free-falling, like you're drowning but the water just won't kill you fast enough. My name is Adam. I'm 42 years old, and I spent 15 years thinking I had it all. A good career, a beautiful wife, 2 amazing kids, and a house filled with memories. My job as a merchant marine kept me away most of the year, but I earned more than enough to give my family a life where they didn't need to worry about anything. I made sure of it. When I met Sophie, she was the girl everyone noticed when she entered a room. Long brown hair that cascaded down her back, warm hazel eyes, and a smile that could make you forget your troubles. I married her young. She was my anchor while I was out at sea, and I thought I was hers too. The only reason I agreed to her staying home and not working was because I wanted her to be there for the kids when I couldn't be. Sophie never complained about it. At least not at first. The distance was hard. I won't lie. Some days the loneliness would eat at me, but I'd always tell myself it was worth it. I'd call her every chance I got, FaceTiming her while waves crashed against the ship's deck, asking her about her day. She'd laugh and tell me about PTA meetings or how our youngest, Dylan, was getting better at baseball. I'd hang up counting down the days until I could walk through that front door and hug them again. 2 years ago, things shifted. Dylan had turned 12, and Sophie came to me with an idea that caught me off guard. She wanted to get a job. "The kids are older now," she told me. "I'm bored, Adam. I want something for myself." At first, I resisted. It wasn't that I didn't trust her or believe in her capabilities. I knew Sophie was smart and could handle anything, but I worried about how she'd juggle work, the kids, and everything at home while I was gone. But she insisted. "I need this," she said, her voice tinged with something between frustration and longing. I eventually gave in, not because I was convinced, but because I wanted her to be happy. And you know what? She thrived. Within 6 months, she landed a job as a marketing assistant at a local firm and quickly became one of their top performers. I was proud of her. She was managing everything, work, home, the kids, and still making time for me, even if our conversations had become shorter and less frequent. I should have noticed the cracks then, the missed calls, the rushed goodbyes, the subtle way her tone changed when I mentioned missing her. But I brushed it off, thinking she was just busy. After all, wasn't this what I wanted? For her to be independent and fulfilled? The beginning of the end came during a stupid argument. I don't even remember what triggered it. Something trivial, like her forgetting to tell me about a school event. We argued over the phone, voices raised, and before I could calm down, she hung up on me. I figured she just needed space, but days passed and she wouldn't answer my calls or texts. Even when I tried reaching out to the kids, they ignored me. A week of silence stretched on until I finally received a text from her. 4 sentences that gutted me. "I'm leaving you. I'm marrying my boss. I'm selling the house. I'm done." I stared at my phone, rereading the words until they blurred together. My breathing slowed, and for a moment the world tilted sideways. She couldn't be serious, right? This had to be a joke. Some cruel, impulsive thing she'd regret in the morning. But as the hours ticked by, reality set in. Sophie had made her decision, and I was powerless to stop it. I tried calling her. She didn't pick up. I tried calling the kids. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bunk, surrounded by the hum of the ship's engines, and for the first time in years, I felt completely adrift. I couldn't leave the ship for another 2 months. The contract locked me in the middle of the ocean with nowhere to go. By the time I returned, the damage would be done. She had the legal power of attorney to sell the house without me, thanks to the trust we'd built over the years. Every asset we'd worked for together was slipping through my fingers like water, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I spent those 2 months replaying every memory, every sign I'd missed. Was she always unhappy? Did I take her for granted? The guilt ate at me during the day, but at night something darker took over. Anger. betrayal, resentment. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing my entire world. When I finally docked and stepped back onto land, I was a shell of the man I used to be. I didn't even go home because there was no home to go back to. Instead, I went to a cheap motel where I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together how everything fell apart so fast. Then, like fate was mocking me, I heard through mutual friends that Sophie had moved into a luxury neighborhood with her new husband, her boss. The man she'd left me for wasn't just any boss. He was a multi-millionaire with a mansion, luxury cars, and apparently enough charm to steal my wife and kids while I was halfway across the globe. But what really pushed me over the edge was hearing about the baby shower. My wife, the woman I built a life with, was pregnant with another man's child. And she didn't even have the decency to tell me herself. I had to see it for myself. When I pulled up outside their mansion, I didn't know what I was expecting. Closure, maybe. Or some kind of confirmation that this nightmare was real. But as I sat in my car, watching the glowing windows and hearing the muffled sounds of laughter, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just betrayal. This was humiliation, and I wasn't going to leave quietly. I sat in my car, fingers tightening around the steering wheel as I watched guests stream into the massive house. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Teslas. People dressed in designer clothes, laughed, hugged, and carried in beautifully wrapped gifts. My stomach churned. This wasn't just any party. It was a celebration. They were celebrating Sophie's new life, her new husband, and their unborn child, like the 15 years we had spent together never existed. I don't even know how long I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to drive away, forget this nightmare, and pretend I never came here. But I couldn't. Not after everything she took from me. I needed to see her. I needed answers. I got out of the car and walked toward the gate. The mansion loomed over me, every window glowing with warmth and luxury, the complete opposite of the cold, empty feeling inside me. As I approached the entrance, a large man in a black suit, clearly hired security, stepped forward. Invitation. Only, he said, blocking my path. I'm her husband, I spat, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I don't need a damn invitation. The guard's expression didn't change. Not anymore, you're not. Turn around. The humiliation hit me like a slap in the face. I wanted to punch him, push past him, do something, but I knew I'd only end up in handcuffs. Sophie was inside, probably surrounded by people telling her how lucky she was to have found such a successful man. Meanwhile, I was being treated like an unwanted guest at my own wife's life. I turned around and walked back to my car, but instead of leaving, I parked a few blocks away and waited. I waited for over an hour, watching through the mansion's windows as the party continued. I could see Sophie moving through the crowd, her hand resting on her slightly swollen belly, her smile wide and genuine. She looked happy, radiant even, the kind of happiness I hadn't seen on her face in years. Was this why she left me? Because I couldn't give her this life of luxury and ease. And then I saw him, her new husband. He stood behind her, his hands possessively on her shoulders as he leaned down to kiss her cheek. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, clean-cut, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I felt like I was suffocating, but the final blow came when I saw my kids. Dylan and Emma were standing next to Sophie, laughing and talking to her new husband like he was their dad. Emma, my 16-year-old daughter, handed Sophie a gift and hugged her tightly. Dylan, my baby boy who used to cry when I left for sea, high-fived the man who replaced me. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. They were happy. My family had moved on without me, and it hadn't even been 2 months. I sat there in the car, my mind spinning with thoughts that I couldn't control. Was Sophie ever truly in love with me, or was I just a placeholder until someone better came along? Had she been planning this for months, maybe even years, while I was away? Then a memory hit me like a tidal wave. It was about a year ago, during one of my brief visits home. We had gone out for dinner and Sophie had been distracted, checking her phone every few minutes. When I asked her who she was texting, she brushed it off, saying it was a coworker. I didn't press her, thinking it was work-related, but now the puzzle pieces were falling into place. The late-night phone calls, the excuses about working overtime, the sudden distance between us. It had all been right in front of me, and I was too blind to see it. I clenched my fists, anger surging through me like a storm. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of trust, of the life we built together. She didn't just cheat on me. She tore our family apart and replaced me with someone richer, someone who could give her the lifestyle she always secretly craved. I couldn't sit there any longer. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it to my face. I got out of the car and walked back to the house. The security guard was still standing at the entrance, but this time, I didn't try to go through the front. Instead, I made my way around the side, slipping through the garden until I reached a patio door. The laughter and clinking of glasses echoed from inside as I pressed my hand against the glass. Through the window, I saw Sophie sitting on the couch, surrounded by her friends. Her new husband knelt beside her, opening gifts and laughing along with the guests. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the life I should have had unfolding without me. Suddenly, Sophie turned her head and looked directly at me. For a split second, her smile faltered. Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic setting in. She whispered something to her new husband, who immediately stood up and walked toward the back of the house. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned around and walked back to my car, my hands shaking with rage. I wasn't going to confront her here. Not in front of all these people who probably thought I was the bad guy, the absent husband who wasn't good enough for her. No, I had something better in mind. As I drove away, my mind raced with possibilities. I had lost everything: my wife, my kids, my home. But I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. If she thought she could humiliate me, take my family, and live happily ever after, she was dead wrong. She took everything from me. Now, I was going to take something from her. Don't remember the drive back to the motel. My mind was a fog of rage and humiliation, replaying the image of Sophie cradling her baby bump, her new husband smiling like he had won some kind of grand prize. My family, the life I built with my blood, sweat, and sacrifices, had been handed over to another man. I could have called her, demanded answers, yelled, screamed, cried. But I knew Sophie too well. She would play the victim, say she didn't mean for things to happen this way and that it was complicated. She'd use the same sweet voice that once made me feel like I was her entire world. And for a second, I'd probably believe her. But not this time. No, she deserved more than just words. She deserved consequences. For the next week, I buried myself in research. I wasn't the kind of man who acted without a plan. And this wasn't just about revenge. It was about teaching her what betrayal really felt like. I started small. Sophie had been living in that mansion, basking in her fairy tale life because of the trust and financial stability I had given her. She was able to get that job, meet her new husband, and sell the house, all because of the foundation I built. So, I called the bank. I still had joint access to our old accounts, the ones she hadn't bothered to separate because she probably thought I'd never fight back. With a few transfers and withdrawals, I drained every last penny from the savings we had built together. Then I froze the account. But that wasn't enough. Money could be replaced. I wanted her to feel the destruction, to understand what it's like to have your entire world ripped out from under you. That's when I thought of the baby. I didn't know if the child was truly her new husband's, or if she had gotten pregnant before we split. Either way, it didn't matter. I wanted to ruin the trust between them, plant a seed of doubt that would rot their relationship from the inside out. I made a call to an old friend of mine, Tony, a private investigator who owed me a favor. I had him track down Sophie's new husband's workplace, his social circles, and, most importantly, his weak spots. Tony was good at what he did. Within days, he had everything I needed. The guy wasn't as squeaky clean as he appeared. There were rumors of previous affairs, a gambling problem he kept hidden, and enough skeletons in his closet to make him paranoid if the right buttons were pressed. I smiled to myself, thinking about how easy it would be to unravel him. But first, I needed to make Sophie panic. I sent her a text from a burner phone. Simple, direct. You don't know everything about your perfect husband, but you will soon. I imagined her reading it, her heart racing, her mind spinning with possibilities. Was it from me? Did someone else know her secrets? Was her new life about to crumble? The thought gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. Then, I sent an anonymous email to her new husband, attaching photos Tony had taken of Sophie meeting her. Old friends at bars late at night, photos that could be easily misinterpreted. I included a line that read, "You might want to get a DNA test for that baby. The fallout happened faster than I expected." A few days later, I parked my car near the mansion again, but this time the atmosphere was different. The house that had been glowing with warmth and laughter now felt cold and distant. The lights were dim, and no cars lined the driveway. Something had shifted. Tony called me that night with an update. Apparently, Sophie's new husband had confronted her about the photos and the text. They had a huge fight, and he stormed out of the house. The next morning, he checked into a hotel downtown. The cracks were spreading, and it wouldn't be long before everything collapsed. But the real victory came when I saw the for sale sign in front of the mansion 2 weeks later. Sophie was losing everything, just like I did. And for a brief moment, I felt like I had won, but the victory was hollow. I thought destroying her life would make me feel better, like it would erase the pain of seeing my kids treat another man like their father. But it didn't. I sat in that motel room staring at the ceiling and realized that I had become something I hated: bitter, vindictive, and empty. I missed my kids. I missed the way Dylan used to run into my arms when I came home from a trip, how Emma used to ask me to help her with her homework. But they were gone, and I wasn't sure if they'd ever forgive me for what I'd done to their mother. I debated reaching out to them, explaining my side of the story. But what was the point? To them, I was probably just the angry dad who couldn't handle losing. Sophie would spin the narrative in her favor, and I'd be the villain no matter what. One night, after too many drinks, I stumbled into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot, my face unshaven and hollow. I barely recognized the man looking back at me. This wasn't who I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be their protector, their provider. But instead, I had let my anger consume me. I had destroyed Sophie's life, but in the process, I had destroyed what little I had left of my own. The next morning, I packed my bags and left the motel. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. Maybe I'd find work in a different city, start over somewhere no one knew me, or maybe I'd disappear entirely, drifting from port to port like the lost sailor I had become. I had won the battle, but in the end, it didn't matter, because Sophie wasn't the only one who lost everything, so did I.